morning, everyone. So welcome. Is everybody awake this morning? Excited to have some coffee with no creamer? Sorry about that. We do have some on the way, so when we do have our break, please come grab some more coffee, and I promise there will be creamer. So my name is Christy Sal, and I'm the Shepherding Director here at the Fostering Collective. And we're partnering today with Restore Family Counseling for this training today called Safeguarding Our Kids. And I'm so glad that you see that this is important. This is not always an easy topic to talk about, but a much needed topic to be able to protect our kids from this icky, hard world. So just a few quick housekeeping rules. We do have some restrooms over here. We are going to offer some breaks. We do have some guests today if you want to go visit our guests that we're excited to have in the room as well. But I just also wanted just to take a quick moment just to pray for our day. God, we just love you. We thank you for how you provide, God, and I thank you for the knowledge that's going to be presented today, God, for the tools to be able to love our kids and love them well. God, I pray for our speakers, God, that you just use them. God, and may this time together just be fruitful and pleasing to you. In your name, amen. So, as those that are coming in, we have lots of seats still at the table, so please, it may not be with your bestie, you just walked in, but I do see several seats that have open spots together back towards the back. Yeah, they're waving you over. They said, come hang out. Yes, so I just wanted to just introduce our first speaker. If you haven't met her or don't know her, I strongly suggest that you do. She's a personal, dear friend. I've gotten to know her well. She's poured into, invested into me and my family, and so I would just love to welcome Keely Burks to the stage.
Christy. I always feel really good about myself after Christy introduces me to people. You ever need a hype girl, she's really good at it. So like Christy said, my name, I'm going to try to organize this up here and I don't spill my coffee on my laptop, that'd be good. Like Christy said, my name's Keely Burks. I'm an LPC here in Tyler, and I've been doing counseling. I kind of click. We're going to try to thank you for Kids for Families for providing lunch. Sorry, I'll read the other one too. Thank you, Fostering Bridges, for hosting our training. There we go. That's where we're starting. Yeah, my name's Keely Burks, and I've been doing counseling here in Tyler for about 15 years. I'm the owner of Restore Family Counseling, and we have a few of our people over here, which I'm excited that they're here. I'm excited that you're all here. Like Christy said, this topic is hard, and it's sticky, and it's tricky, and it's difficult, I think, for a lot of us to sit and think about and to hear the stories and see the things that we see and hear the things that we hear related to this topic. But it is really important, and you're here because you live with this or you work with this, and so thank you for being here and for being willing to sit and listen and learn. So when Christy approached me a few months ago about doing this training, the first thing I told her was, oh my gosh, Christy, we have to talk about shame. We have to. Because shame is what is driving so much of these sexualized behaviors that we see with our kiddos. And so I want to start today, all right, this is my first, I'm going to start with a story. This little doll baby, this is actually my daughter, and she's pretty cute. I'm sharing this picture and this story with her permission, but what I don't have permission to share with you is her name. I only have 2 daughters, and so for those of you that know that, good luck trying to figure out which one this is, because I can't tell you her name. But We will, for the sake of this story and conversation, we're going to call her Princess Rainbow Sparkle, because that is the name she went by when she was about this age. She wanted to be called that all the time. So I'm not going to tell you her real name to protect her identity, but we'll just refer to her as that. So if we were able to zoom in on this picture a little bit, it's kind of hard to see here, but there's a little smudge of something on her cheek. And this picture was taken in the kitchen of my home. And in the background, you don't know this, but in the background of this picture, there's a plate of chocolate chip cookies. Okay? And we all probably know where this is going. So this plate of chocolate chip cookies sitting there, so tempting. And sweet little Princess Rainbow Sparkle walked into the kitchen and she, finds the cookies, right? And is tempted to do something she knows she's not supposed to do. And what does she do? She does the thing she knows she's not supposed to do, and she eats a number of cookies, quite a few, way more than she should have. And a few minutes later, I enter the room, I see the cookies, I see many of them are missing, and I look at Princess Rainbow Sparkle and I say, Princess Rainbow Sparkle, what happened to all these cookies? And she looked at me and said, I don't know, Mommy. I don't know what happened to those cookies. And I said, Princess Rainbow Sparkle, I think maybe you're not telling me the truth right now. And this is what she did. No, Mommy. If I'm smiling, it means I'm not lying to you. And she proceeded to stand there and smile. And I took out my camera and I snapped this picture right there. Now, I just told you all of the external exchanges and the external interactions that happened around this picture, okay? All of the things that were said, all of the actions that were done, but while all of these external things were happening, she, sweet girl, was having a whole internal experience at the same time. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is this internal experience that we have, that our children have, the kids that we're working with, the kids that we're living with, are experiencing these things all the time, especially when they're engaging in these sexualized behaviors. So here we go. All right. The first thing we've got to do is separate out guilt and shame. Now, if you are, how many people here are professional, like mental health professionals, or this is your job is to work with sometimes challenging kiddos? Okay. How many of you are living with maybe a challenging kiddo or two or three or more? Okay, yeah. All right, so we're about half and half, so that's good. I'm in both categories, so I get to raise my hand on both of those. So one thing that I think we collectively, just as people, as professionals, sometimes we use guilt and shame interchangeably, like they mean the same thing and they don't. Those are actually two very different things, and so we're going to spend a little bit of time kind of separating these out and kind of understanding the difference between guilt. What does guilt look like? What purpose does guilt serve? What does shame look like? What purpose does shame serve? And so we're going to go from there. So some of what we're talking about today, I'm going to try, guys. I'm going to try to do this. Some of what we're talking about today, actually a lot of what we're talking about today, comes from Kurt Thompson's book called The Soul of Shame. So this is a couple of quotes where he's kind of separating out guilt and shame. So he says, researchers have described shame as a feeling that is deeply associated with a person's sense of self, apart from any interactions with others. Okay, so shame has to do with self. Guilt, on the other hand, emerges as a result of something I have done that negatively affects someone else. Okay? So guilt, in short, this bottom quote kind of summarizes the top one. Guilt is something I feel because I have done something bad. Shame is something I feel because I am bad. All right. So results of guilt. Guilt is a necessary component of guilt is empathy. Because guilt is so others-oriented, you have to have at least some measure of empathy in order to feel any level of guilt. So Webster defines guilt as the action of understanding, being aware of, being sensitive to, and vicariously experiencing the feelings, thoughts, and experience of another. I mean, I did not look up the word empathy, but I feel like if we looked up the word empathy, it would actually be pretty close to that. We can experience guilt without shame, but it's very unlikely we will experience shame without guilt. When we consciously feel guilt, we consciously make a choice to either repair the wrong, which leads to life and joy, or we bury it, leading to shame. Okay? So guilt is the pathway often to repair, to restoration, to reconciliation. I know sometimes, and like I said, I'm a counselor, so I'm like coming from that worldview and that lens, but I know often in therapy, a lot of counselors are work towards not wanting their clients to feel guilt. We don't want them to feel guilty because that's uncomfortable, and we don't want them to be uncomfortable. Well, no, sometimes we need to feel guilt because we are guilty. Sometimes we messed up. Sometimes our kids mess up, and sometimes they need to feel guilty. And that's not a negative thing, it's not a bad thing, it is an uncomfortable thing. But the discomfort of that guilt is what often motivates us to change and do things differently in the future. So while we don't want for somebody to think, gosh, I'm just like, and this is the difference between separating out guilt and shame. Guilt draws attention to another person rather than to self. I can feel guilty because I recognize that the thing I did hurt you. And that's not okay. Shame is this inward spiral. We're gonna talk about this quite a bit today. But shame is an inward spiral that turns into this completely internal experience. And it has nothing to do with repair. In fact, it inhibits repair and keeps us from being able to reconcile often. All right, results of shame. Shame reminds us of our humanity and our imperfections. And the difference between guilt and shame, both are pretty uncomfortable, right? Neither of them are fun to sit in and feel and hang out there. But shame, and we're about to, the next line there, shame internalizes our imperfections. And it makes them seem like part of our identity. So I hear this all the time, and maybe you hear it too with kids that live in your home or kids that you work with, or maybe you've even heard it in yourself. Maybe you've heard yourself say these things. I know one of my kiddos not one of the kids that I work with, but one of my kids, when they mess up, they say all repeatedly over and over and over, I'm such a bad kid. I am such a bad kid. That's shame. That is not guilt. That is shame. Because he has made his mistakes, he has made his bad choices. Now he has turned that into an I statement. It's not just a statement of, wow, I messed up and I need to repair this. He's turned it into a statement about himself. Shame disconnects us from parts of ourselves. So these are either parts that we don't like. Okay, maybe it's a part of you that feels anger, intense anger maybe, or a part of you that feels intense hurt, a part of you that's very vulnerable or sensitive, or maybe it's a part of you that somebody has said to you at some point is not okay or not acceptable. But usually, these parts that we separate from, that shame disconnects us from, are the parts that we perceive others don't like. Okay? So while shame disconnects us from parts of ourselves, shame also disconnects us from others. And this is what we see time and time and time and time again with our kiddos that are engaging in these sexualized behaviors. And we're about to unpack how that plays out at a very specific level. Okay. So components of shame. All right, so this is another quote from Kurt Thompson's The Soul of Shame. This is how he defines shame. Shame is a neurophysiological phenomenon that is our system's way of warning of possible impending abandonment. I'm going to say that again. Shame is a neurophysiological phenomenon, which means your body and your nervous system, right? Neuro is nervous system, physiological body. So it's an experience that happens in our bodies that is our system's way of warning of possible impending abandonment. Now, one thing that I want to really highlight here, a lot of the kids that we are working with, that we are living with, that probably struggle with this stuff, possible impending abandonment is not really their experience. They have experienced real abandonment, right? They have lived this out. They have bio families that have dropped them for whatever reason, and whether it's an issue that is the responsibility of their bio families, or whether it's maybe their bio parents are also victims of things, and often that is the case as well. Either way, the kiddos that you guys are working with and that you guys are living with, they experience that as abandonment no matter what. So this is not a possibility for them. This is actually a reality, right? So that changes things a little bit, because when we know, if you've ever, I don't know if you've ever been, well, I'll give you an example. When I was in high school, I was 18 and I was involved in a pretty bad car accident. Thankfully, obviously, I was fine, but because I'm standing here now. But it was very, very scary. And until before I experienced that, every time I got behind the wheel of my car, or even into a car at all, I knew there was a possibility that I could be involved in a car accident. But that wasn't a reality for me until it happened. And for a while after it happened, I experienced a little bit of there was this tension that I didn't have before of getting in my car. There was some fear there that did not exist before I was involved in that car accident, right? That's kind of what our kids are dealing with. This is not a possible situation. This is a real life thing that has already happened, that they've already lived through and walked through. And now they have to learn how to live in light of the fact that this is actually their reality. So their bodies, just like my body wanted to protect me from going through that traumatic experience again, right? Their bodies also are going to be super sensitive to anything that looks like, feels like, smells like, sounds like potential abandonment, because they've already lived it. So you have to keep that in the back of our minds too. All right, so components of shame. All right, so this is kind of the way that I conceptualize how shame goes for most of us. We start with the perceived failure. If we go back to Princess Rainbow Sparkle, okay, her perceived failure was what? What did she do? Huh? What? She didn't follow the rules, that's right. She did something she wasn't supposed to do. She ate some cookies that were not hers to eat. And so she failed to do the thing that she knew she was supposed to do, and she did. That is an accurate description. What comes after a perceived failure are feelings of inadequacy. And these things happen so fast. I mean, we're talking like milliseconds, right? There's a perceived failure, and then immediately following this failure is, oh, I can't do it. I'm inadequate. I don't have what it takes to hold up my end of the deal. What comes after that is hopelessness to recover. And the more times that this little pattern happens, the hopelessness kind of upticks a little bit every single time. So if you have a situation where, this is the same behavior, you've been seeing the same behavior 15, 20, 30, 18 bajillion times, every time they do it, they feel a little bit more hopeless to recover from these feelings of inadequacy. A few weeks ago, my son came home from school and he'd had a no good, really bad day, real bad. And he'd done some things at school, he got in big trouble at school, and he came home, and of course, and then we have to deal with it at home, and that's bad. And he just, this is him 1,000 times, this is what he does. And we were talking about the thing, and he's super mad at himself, and he's beating himself up. And then there was this spark for me of hope where he said, Mommy, can I go jump on the trampoline? I think I need to go jump on the trampoline right now. And I was like, yes, go do that. I was actually very proud of him because I was like, okay, like he's catching the thing. He knows he's got like a lot of energy and anger and frustration. He wants to get it out. He knows that's a tool. And I was like, yes, we're doing it. Finally, right? And from my kitchen table, I can see our trampoline in the backyard. And I can see him jumping, and he's jumping, and he is getting the anger out. And he is, with much vigor, he is jumping on his trampoline. And he's also a gymnast, and so he's in gymnastics and does lots of flips and tricks and whatever. Well, he decided that in this moment when he's very upset, very angry, very frustrated with himself, that this might be a good time to try a new flip that he, one, had not been fully coached on and trained how to do, and two, had not been cleared by his coach to do without a spotter. And so he does I can see him, I watch him, I see him do this flip, and he lands like right here on his neck, the back of his head and neck. And I was like, oh, that doesn't look good. And then he immediately got up and did it again and landed the exact same way. And the second time he did not get up. He was fine, but for a hot second, I wasn't sure if we weren't going to be life-flighting him somewhere. So we get him off the trampoline. Now he was already super emotional. He has big feelings. And get him off the trampoline. And now on top of being angry with himself, now he's really scared because he recognizes that he almost hurt himself really badly. And he knew. And so he comes inside with me, and we're sitting there. And he said, Mommy, you need to sell the trampoline. Just sell it. Just get rid of it. I don't want it here. I can't handle it. And this is what he said. This is what hopelessness right here looks like. He said, I know I can't get on the trampoline and not do the things that I'm not supposed to do. I can't do it. The trampoline needs to go. That's what it looks like. So our kids that are doing these things over, and the truth is he can. He many times gets on the trampoline and doesn't do the things that he's not trained to do. He knows how and when to stop himself. But in that moment, he was already out of control before he started. So So that's what this looks like. Now, this hopelessness then leads, we have fear of abandonment. Okay? There's this fear that you are going to leave, that their need is too much, their need is too great, their inadequacy, they're never, ever, ever going to measure up because they're hopeless. There's hopelessness to measure up. They're not going to. And that leads us to our last thing here of fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. I don't know why that F is over there by itself. Fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, which we're probably all familiar with, but we're gonna unpack some of the behaviors that go with these. So, all right, perceived failure. Failure can be real or imagined. Okay. So, like for instance, did Princess Rainbow Sparkle really eat the cookies? Yes, she really did. In fact, when I was asking her permission to share this story, she remembered doing that. And she said, oh my gosh, my stomach hurts so bad after I ate all those. She's 12 now. She was 4 in that picture. So she remembered that moment, based off of how many cookies she'd eaten. That was a real failure, to the point that she still, 8 years later, remembers doing it. That was real. Now, my son on the trampoline, did he really fail to do the thing he's supposed to do? Yes. But the way that he interpreted that failure was not accurate. So his interpretation, that was a perceived failure, that I can never and I will never be successful at this. That's not true. He's successful at it all the time. He gets out there and jumps all the time and doesn't do the things he's not supposed to do. So failure can be openly communicated or subtly communicated. Openly communicated, this is when we say, or somebody says, it doesn't necessarily have to come from us, but when there is verbal communication, why can't you ever get this right? Where is it coming from? Why would you do this? Okay, that's open communication. Subtle communication might be a which I'm very guilty of. I try not to, but man, it happens. It comes out. Failure is part of how they view their identity. They see it as the word failure and themselves, they almost see as interchangeable. Okay, thoughts of hopelessness. Because of the pervasiveness of our perceived failure as an identity, okay, because of the pervasiveness, this is in every area of life, we believe we are unable to overcome this part of ourselves. So when we have kiddos that are struggling with these sexualized behaviors, and again, Taylor's going to come and talk in a few minutes about the addictive nature of some of that, okay? And the kind of some of the brain stuff and the neurochemicals and whatnot that happen with addiction and addictive behaviors. But when we see these repeated things over and over, it's not like, and this is how shame works. Shame doesn't compartmentalize itself to that one part of their life. It's not like they're like, oh gosh, yeah, I'm such a failure with this. I keep touching my sibling in inappropriate places in inappropriate ways. I'm such a failure here. But man, I'm a great student. I'm so good. I am such a good friend. That's not how it works. Shame seeps into everything, every part of their life. They think, I'm a bad son, I'm a bad friend, I'm not good at school. And then those things eventually can become self-fulfilling prophecies, and then they are not good at school and they don't perform well. But a lot of that comes from their internalization of their shame about this one thing. So because we see our situation as hopeless and unchanging, we put very little effort towards changing those behaviors. So think about it. If you think there's something, an area in your life that you are not capable of doing anything about, are you going to put a lot of energy into changing it? No, of course not. In fact, I know, and I've had, countless therapy sessions with people about what can you control, what can you not control. We're going to let go of the things you can't control, right? So if there's something that you think you can't control, even though maybe you can, you're not going to even try. Why would you? That'd be silly. And so that's what happens with our kiddos. When they engage in these behaviors over and over and over, and shame has so deeply infiltrated into all these different areas of life, they don't want to put effort into it. They're not going to. All right, fear of abandonment. For the vast majority of our kids from hard places, like we said before, abandonment isn't just a fear, it's a reality. They have already walked through this. And because of the beautiful way that our bodies are designed and created to protect us, which is such a gift, that our nervous system, we are hardwired to be protected. Their bodies are going to work extra hard to protect them from the real threat, very real threat of abandonment. Because again, they've already lived this. They've already walked this out. Okay. All right, so this is that neurophysiological phenomenon that was in or not the first quote, but the quote from Soul of Shame. Okay, so we're gonna kind of break this down a little bit. So again, neurophysiological, that has to do nervous system and your body. So these are things that are happening in our bodies. So this can begin as early as 12 to 18 months old. How many of you have been working with or living with the child or children that you're talking about since they were 12 to 18 months old? A few, most not. So a lot of this, and I would even venture to say some of this can even happen in utero. When you have in utero trauma, that they come out of the womb and already at a disadvantage. But this can mean a glance. Okay, if you raise an eyebrow, which is y'all, and please don't ever raise your eyebrows. Okay, please don't hear that. But what we want to do here is recognize that our facial expressions, which sometimes we can't control, y'all. I'm saying that from personal experience. I don't know that I could ever tell somebody, you need to not have a facial expression when you feel an emotion. That's not real life. Where you're going to feel things, and sometimes you're going to feel frustration, and sometimes it's going to come out of your face. I saw a meme the other day. It said something like, I'm going to botch it, but it was something like, anytime I try to close my mouth and not say words, subtitles come out of my face. That's what we're talking about here. When you have subtitles all over your face and your kids are very, very much know what you're thinking, even if you don't say it. The intent and the outcome sometimes don't match, right? You may have really good intentions to love your kid well, even when they're really hard to love, to walk with them through whatever trauma, whatever difficult behaviors, whatever things that they're dealing with, internally, externally. You may have all the right intentions, and the outcome might still be problematic. Okay, that is the nature of being human. And I say this now. This has been a lot of area of growth for me personally. Learning how to separate out, the things that my parents didn't do great, that I maybe was really critical of for a while, and then at times found myself doing those same things with my own kids and going, oh no, Roro, I'm doing it. I didn't mean to, I didn't want to. That's what we're talking about. Knowing that the outcome sometimes does not match and line up with what we intended to be. So we're talking about a glance. It can be a tone of voice. Again, the whole I catch myself all the time. My kids are, want to tell me something about their day or want to ask me a question or whatever, and what? Well, that doesn't sound very nice. What? And I don't mean it to not be nice, but it sounds that way, probably to them sometimes. I think sometimes they think they're annoying me. And maybe sometimes, if I'm being honest, they are. And that's a heart issue with me, right? Not them. That's not their problem, that's me. The ignoring of a need. This can be deliberate neglect, or it can be an unintentional ignoring of a need. So when my oldest daughter was born, she was born with reflux. And I don't know if anyone here has experienced that, but it was my own personal hell for the first while of being a parent. It was rough. And poor thing, I hated it for her. It was so hard. She cried all the time, and we didn't know why. We had no idea. We couldn't figure it out. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know what it was. And so we couldn't meet the need because we didn't know what the need was. Now, eventually we figured it out, and we got her on medicine, and then she was a completely different child, and it was like we slept and she slept, and man, that was amazing. But for a while, as this sweet little newborn, helpless little baby, her body and her nervous system was experiencing that as if we were ignoring her need. We weren't. We just didn't know what it was. We weren't trying to do that. We were trying to meet the need. We couldn't figure it out. So sometimes we, by unintentionally either not knowing that there is a need or not knowing what the need is, and man, with so many of our kids, if you have not been with them from day one, and by day one I mean conception, if you have not been with them from day one, they are going to have needs you don't know about. That's just reality. That is the fact. So the last thing, a sign that a child senses of disapproval. Now the thing with this is that I think is interesting is usually we don't even know what these things might be. Okay? And they may not even know what these things are. These are the kinds of things that I feel like when you go to therapy when you're 35 and then you start, you and your therapist are like going back through your childhood, and then you start to realize like, oh my gosh, that one time my mom yelled at me that one time. Or that one time my mom said this one thing to me. She probably meant this, that she said this, and that was what I heard. That's a sign that you interpreted that as a sign of disapproval, and you didn't even know it at the time. So these are some of the things that can begin very, very early on, where our kiddos are interpreting things, as shame, really, and they can start to internalize this. So it says our system's way of warning. So this is the neurophysiological phenomenon, our system's way of warning, and then the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. I wish we had if we had like 30 extra minutes, I would go into that, but I will not. Basically, sympathetic and parasympathetic are kind of the yin and yang of our nervous system. They are two different parts that work together that make up the entire nervous system. Sympathetic nervous system, sometimes we call that fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. Okay, that's the sympathetic. Parasympathetic we call rest and digest. Now, our nervous system is meant to and designed to be a cycle that goes back and forth and back and forth. And a really strong nervous system can get ramped up and it can come back down. That's what a good nervous system does. Nervous systems that are in trouble, like most of our kids, have been ramped up way too long, and they don't know how to come back down. So we're going to talk about some of these ramped up behaviors. All right, so fight. I have to take some deep breaths for this one, because this is one of my kids. Fight, kiddos, people, and there might be some in this room. You might be a fighter. And this is we're talking about when shame enters the scene. This is what a fighter might do. Okay, they might have aggression. They might be irritable, and they might rage. These are very externally directed arousals, so it's very out here. Now, the thing with fighters, my fighter yesterday spent almost an hour in his room screaming about doing some things he didn't want to do. He had received some discipline and he did not enjoy it. And he went in his room and he yelled about it for about an hour. And after an hour, he came out singing a worship song. So the thing with fighters is they get ramped up real fast and real high, but usually they come back down pretty quick too, and then it's over. They have racing and intense thoughts. Often they are coming out of their mouth loudly with a harsh tone of voice. They have a very rigid posture because they're quite literally their body is preparing to fight, actually physically fight. So you may see their muscles tense. They might make fists. Their jaw might tighten, might grit their teeth. Okay, there's a rigidity into their posture, and they have a rage-filled mood. Okay, this is what this looks like. There's yelling often. They're very defensive. Fighters they may eventually take ownership of their wrongdoing, or poor choices, but it often, if they get there, it takes them a long time. They usually are very defensive. They typically justify their poor choices, and they tend to blame everybody else. So you might know someone that looks like that. All right, next we have flight. So what does flight look like? Withdrawal, escape, isolation, avoidance, running away. Their thoughts are focused on escaping the threat. Their tone of voice is neutral. They don't want to rock the boat until they can get out of it. They have a closed-off posture, an avoidant mood. Examples of what this can look like is leaving the room, storming off. They're fidgety. They're looking for a way out. You see the nervous energy trying to escape. You can see it come out of their body. And they often have kind of darting eyes because they're looking for an escape. So if you see these behaviors, that might be a pretty good sign that, one, you have a fleer, and also they might be experiencing shame in that moment. Freezing, shut down. Sometimes we call this, about to say hypervigilant. Sometimes we call this dissociation or dissociative type behavior. So they're shut down and hypervigilant. There's a lack of movement, few facial expressions, very disconnected. They have cyclical and self-shaming thoughts that usually, as a sidebar, don't come out of their mouth. They just sit there and they think it over and over and over again. So you may not even know that they are internally just beating themselves up over and over and over again. They have a monotone voice. They're sluggish, have a hunched posture, an apathetic mood, as if they don't care. But really, with that apathy, what looks like apathy is actually self-defeat. That's actually what you're seeing. So examples of this are shutting down, withdrawing, folded arms, a lack of eye contact, and they may seem distracted. So those times when you have a kiddo that won't look you in the eye and you're begging them, maybe demanding that they look you in the eye, this is probably what's going on. They are freezing up. They're dissociating and disconnecting, which is, again, shame, separating, isolating them, even from themselves, from you. Okay, fawn is our last one here. And then we're going to do an exercise. Okay, appeasing. Princess Rainbow Sparkle. She's a fawner. that golden smile. Now we talk about her charm. She still does that. It looks a little different at 12 years old than it did at 4. It's a little more sophisticated now. Now she does things like she becomes very helpful. They're appeasing and people-pleasing, a denial of their own needs, putting everyone else first. Their thoughts are focused on, defaulting to others' opinions. Sorry, left that one out. Thoughts are focused on what others are thinking. They're upbeat and neutral tone of voice. They have an inward or collapsed posture, and their mood is forced cheerfulness. Now, I'm not going to call anybody out here, but most helpers are fawners. I'm going to guess probably a lot of people in this room might fall under this category. That when you experience shame, this might be the thing that you turn to. So examples of this are agreeableness, agreeing with everything you say, lying to keep the peace. Oh no, Mommy, I don't know anything about those cookies. Giving constant praise or encouragement, and working extra hard to impress you. Okay, so we have an exercise. I'm not going to skip it. I'm going to tell you to do it on your own time because you probably have done this before. I think in your packet, there is a drawing of a body. Yep. Okay, I'm seeing you flip to it. Good. Yep, that's it. Okay. So you may have done this before. If you haven't, you definitely need to do it. I just don't think we have time because I really want to do the other activity that I have. But this is a great thing to do with clients, with adults, children, teenagers, whatever. Do it with yourself too. I want you to do it with yourself. So when you experience shame, because we're talking about this physiological experience that we have. You experience this in your body just like your kids do. Just like any adults that you work with do. So when you have time, because we're gonna run out of time. So when you have time, I want you to spend a few minutes thinking about identifying where in your body you experience this. What parts of your body are recruited to warn you of possible impending abandonment? That fear that people are going to leave because I'm too bad. I'm too wrong. Okay? We're gonna hop over that. But I do want you, maybe when you go home, or maybe you can do it with somebody in your home too. That would also be a great thing to do. A great connecting activity to do with if you live with a child that's challenging. I actually might even do this with my kids. That would be a great thing to do with them, is to sit down together and talk about, both of you, where you experience these things in your bodies. Okay. Well, this is the thing we all want to know, right? Okay, we talked about shame for almost an hour. It's a long time. So now what? What do we do with this? Okay, we've seen it, we know what it is, we know where it comes from, and we kind of know like the components of it and how this shakes out a lot of the time. But what do we do now? Well, the first thing we need to do is shift our expectations for our kids. Now, I don't want you to hear, don't have expectations for your kids. That's not it. Yes, have expectations for your kids. You need to expect things from them. You need to expect good things from them. However, I'm going to tell a brief story about to kind of explain this. This is not what color my hair naturally is. I don't even want to say that, but it's true. And my hair girl that I go to was telling me this story one time about her, when she was early in her career. She said she would have these people come in and they would have like, black hair, and they would want it to be like platinum blonde, and they would come in and say, I want platinum today. And she said, I felt bad to tell them, like, no, I don't think that's a good idea. So she's like, I would just do it. I would just make their hair the color that they wanted, knowing that if I took it from black to platinum, it was going to destroy their hair. I knew that. But I would do it because that's what they wanted, and I didn't feel like I could tell them no, so I would just do it. And she said, after a while, I got to where I was like, this is not good. I just need to be honest with them and tell them the truth. And so she has, I'm sure anyone who's ever been to a hair salon, you've seen the swaths of hair, and it goes from like black to white and everything in between. And so she said, I would tell them, okay, your hair color is here, and you want to be here. I can get you today, I can get you to here. But I can't get you to here because your hair is going to fall out and break. So we're going to get you to here today, and then I want you to come back in 4 months, and then in 4 months I can get you from here to here. And then I want you to come back in 4 more months, and I can get you from here to here. And then in 4 months, I want you to come back, and I can get you from here to here. And in about a year and a half, we can get you from here to here, and you're going to get to keep your hair, and it's going to be fine. Okay? And I thought, boy, that is a really good analogy for what we, I think, sometimes try to do with our kids. Our kids come to us, and they are way over here. And we want them to be over here. But the reality is, they're coming from generations, sometimes 4 or 5, 6, we don't even know how many generations back of this over here. And what there's a lot we don't know about genetics and how our environment impacts genetics, but we know that they do interact with each other, and those genetics get passed down. And so there are even genetic factors that are in play over here. And so for us to expect in one generation we're going to get from here to here is kind of silly when you think about it. So if we, instead of aiming for platinum blonde, if we aimed for like a good honey brown, like right here in the middle, that's actually pretty realistic. You might get your child from a life of homelessness and addiction to stable living conditions. They may not graduate from college, but they might get a decent paying job and learn how to have quasi-healthy relationships. That's pretty good. That's actually great if that's where they end up landing. So you've moved the bar quite a bit, but it's very unlikely and probably unrealistic that they're going to end up over here. I have 2 bio children too. They started out like here. So to get them to platinum is like, no biggie. They don't have the same genetic components that our adopted kiddo has. They don't have the same trauma. They don't have any of that. So they started out much closer, and it's a much easier shift, right? So shifting our expectations. Recognize the ways that your kids mask their shame. And I know you all see these masks. We're going to do that here in just a second. dealing with your own story and shame. I'm just going to say, if you are not in therapy, you need to be in therapy. Everybody, every person. If you are living with, working with, dealing with challenging kids, or any kids or people ever, then you should probably be in counseling. I'm in therapy. Most of my staff is in therapy. I so strongly believe in it, and so much believe that it can change your life. And when it changes your life, the ripple effects go out, and it changes the lives of the people that you live with, the people you care for. Okay? Being vulnerable when it's appropriate. So we've talked about how isolating shame is. So when you are able to share a story with your kids of something that happened to you, or maybe something that you did that you're not particularly proud of. Now, again, the key word here is appropriate. Okay. It is so empowering and life-giving for our kids when they are able to look at us and go, wait, what? You too? You have felt the way I'm feeling right now? And you survived it? And you still have people in your life that love you and care about you? It helps them to recognize that shame is not the end-all be-all, that they too can overcome and survive it. Another thing that I think is super helpful is depersonalizing shame, separating shame from themselves, because most of the time when we hear shameful thoughts and shameful things, and that I am bad and I am terrible and I'm such a bad kid, almost always we hear that in our own voice. So when we separate that and go, that's not you. That's shame trying to tell you that that's true. That is not true of you. And helping them recognize, okay, shame is saying this to me, but shame is not me. That's not who I am. It's really, really powerful. And then being willing to join them in the fight against their shame. Which obviously, if you're here, you're very willing to do that. So I want you to take these masks. We're going to finish with this. Masks on your table. Everybody grab one. And there's some markers in the middle of the table. Grab a marker, color of your choice. Does anybody need one? Raise your hand if you don't have one. Okay, Tiffany's running around and passing some out. Christy, I think we have one right here in the middle. Raise your hand high if you still need one. Everybody looks like maybe. Okay. Oh, yes. Okay, you don't have to have the string. The string is not important. I mean, if you really want to wear this later, you can, but I wouldn't if it were me. Okay, so here's what I want you to do. I want you to take your marker and I want you to draw a line down the middle of your mask. On one side of that mask, I want you to write some things that you do to mask your shame. We went through several examples. You can refer back to our fight, flight, freeze, and fawn lists if you want to. But you may have something like humor. Maybe you use humor to mask your shame. Maybe deflection. Maybe you ignore the thing. But I want you to take a few minutes and I want you to think about that. And then after you do that on the first side, on the other side, I want you to think about a kiddo that you either work with or live with. And I want you to think about some things that they do to mask their shame. Maybe it's raging. Maybe it's lying. Wanting to sell a trampoline. And if you're feeling really brave, on the inside of the mask, if you want to, you do not have to by any means, you can write down things that contribute to the shame. What are the behaviors that bring shame out for you or for your child? So what we want to do here is we want to connect what we see, this external experience, with the internal experience that they're having. When we're able to connect and identify that our child's lying is actually their shame, we respond pretty differently to that. And when we respond differently, it gives them hope. Okay, while y'all are working on that, Christy's going to come up, and I think we have a giveaway.
Yes,
We have a giveaway. Free stuff. Okay, thank you guys.